welcoming writer-director Christopher Zalla. Producer and star Eugenio Derbez. And producer Ben Odell. And lastly, we're going to go to two programs with Eugenio.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us this evening. I would love to start with what drew you all initially to this project? And let's start with you, Eugenio.
Well, I remember in 2012 when everything started, I was in Mexico and watching the news at night, and all of a sudden I saw they were talking about this, about the magazine, the cover in the magazine, and they were saying that this little girl from a public school in Matamoros, she was considered in the US like the next Steve Jobs. And I was really curious about the whole story, but they didn't say that much. And years later, the journalist who wrote the article contacted us at the office to offer us the rights to make a movie about this. And I immediately told Ben, my business partner, I remember the story. So, and then I learned that there was a teacher behind Paloma, and immediately it was the perfect story for us, for the company.
And when did you know that Chris was the right director to bring on? And also would love to hear your personal connection to it, Chris.
Chris and I went to film school together and graduated in 2004, I think. And we made a movie together that Chris wrote while he was in film school called Padre Nuestro. Which came out as Sangre de mi Sangre. Thank you, IFC, for making that confusion. And Eugenio, who I had just met around that time, was on Broadway when we were shooting the movie, and Chris really wanted a Mexican actor in the kitchen because all the kitchens in New York at the time were Mexican, and there were no Mexican actors in New York because all the Mexican actors went to LA, and he was on Broadway. So I called him one day and said, I know we just met, but would you ever want to be in this little drama with no money? You're gonna have to change out of a van, and it's gonna be horrible. And he said, yes. Because he wanted to do drama and he had money. So that's how Chris and I started our journey together. And then when we read the article, I just knew with Chris, his sort of relentless pursuit of an authentic storytelling was what this needed, and rawness, that he delivered it, I think.
By the way, he won the Sundance Film Festival with Sangre de mi Sangre in 2007, and then he came back with Radical, and he won again the Sundance Film Festival this year.
So with all that preface and build up, so when I won Sundance, we were the last movie of the night. The experience was really kind of terrible. The whole week, we were the cheapest movie there by far. We were in Spanish, we were dark. I believe someone said it was like, whoever made this movie hates humanity. It's like a kick to the teeth. And then at the very end of the entire night, the last award they give is the Grand Jury Prize for U.S. Dramatic, and I'll never forget Sarah Polley calling the award, and I told this story actually with Laura Kimmersley in a car. So apparently I gave the longest speech in the history of Sundance, if that's true. And actually, I don't remember any of it, because what was going through my head over and over again was this just broken record, I'm a fraud. And I fooled them all, and they're stupid, and I'm a fraud. And I probably could have survived it until Ben showed me the video of myself doing the speech. And it was really the beginning of a journey where I just completely lost my track and went like like just kind of lost even my love for filmmaking. And so I decided to take my wife, who's an adventurous spirit, and my 10-month-old son, and we moved to Guatemala, where I ended up living for 8 years, and through just kind of starting over and finding a love, came to love working again. And in the midst of that, Ben sent me this article, which now I had a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who was just getting into school. I was trying to get him in the school system there. It's very much like this one, had no kind of relationship to education. It was more like, herding cats. And, I'd also become a father. But the story of a teacher, and I don't know how much you got from the actual backstory of Sergio, but of a guy who basically had a nervous breakdown. The only thing he wanted to do, he was not succeeding. He just desperately tries this new thing. I connected to that very personally. I think the fatherhood and the school thing was very personally. And then, we had this thing called the pandemic. And, school online for kindergarten, which is what I was witnessing. Here I am, like, I got so much, there was so much suffering, but I had so much respect for teachers. How did they do this wizardry? All that was sort of in the moment of writing, when Ben sent it to me, and then writing it, I was just, I could not do it. I just could not do it.
And I'm glad you said authenticity, Ben, because that's what struck me the first time I saw it and the second time I saw the film. I have family that's from that region of Mexico, and it feels lived in. I feel like I'm walking those streets with them. And something that I feel like really stands out from other teacher narratives is how you face head on the difficulties of their lives, but you still end on a hopeful note. How did you strike that balance? That's to you.
Well, I think, first of all, Dead Poets Society probably changed my life. We were just talking about this outside. That event that was on the news a few years back of like all these kids in red Trump hats circling around an indigenous person at the mall and shouting down. That was my high school, those kids. And to see, this idea, that movie, that you cannot follow the crowd, you can do your own thing, probably made me a filmmaker. I think it just started there. I'll pass on to Ben for a minute because I'm getting angry about those guys right now.
No, when we started talking about it, what was, I think, exciting for all of us is that it's a genre that feels like it's been done a lot, but it really hasn't. It's probably been, I don't know, there's probably 10 movies out there. Maybe you throw the Coach movies in there too. But the idea of taking it and setting it in a place we've never seen a story like this before, obviously a true story, and through the vision of Chris, who really grinds things down and makes them raw and real, it felt like there was a way to sort of honor that genre that we love so much, but also subvert it in small ways. But the ending, in fact, we talked about the ending from the beginning. I think I was always the one that was sort of like, I think it ends on the exam, because it felt like getting those kids there after a tragic event was going to be kind of the most important piece, and then everything else that you can kind of let it roll at the end. But we talked a lot about, as he was, Chris when he writes, like, you become his muse, whether you like it or not. We have hundreds of pages of emails to prove it. But we were trying to figure out how you can sort of thread that needle and make it feel hopeful without making it feel false.
And I have to just jump in though. I think one thing that's really critical there, it is uplifting, but it's also extremely heartbreaking. Yeah. I think, and it's this idea, and I don't think these kind of movies have done that before. They end on the uplifting note, and to me, I think it was really important. A teacher can affect so much change, but at the end of the day, I mean, like, who's the antagonist in this movie? It's like their circumstances, it's society. There are still bigger, deeper problems. Like, yeah, education can help us chip away at them. Education is probably the most profound, fundamental place we can start. But the reality of our society, and it's a mistake to think of this as something that's happening in Mexico. We have the same issues here, and it's pretty common around the world. But but there are problems that are bigger and deeper. And it just felt to both of us like to really hit the right note here, we need to leave it with that complication. On some level, we enjoy the joy that is learning and possibility, but it would be, I think, not genuine and not accurate to just sort of say, and it's all going to be fine.
Yeah.
And by the way, one thing Chris did so well in his first movie that always stuck with me is it's a very open-ended ending on Sangre, and there's something very powerful about it forcing you into a dialogue as you leave the theater. You're still in dialogue with the movie. And so there was a lot of conversation around it. I love how he ends the movie because it does leave you with, can that kid ever get there? There's always going to be a kid left outside of the system. And I think the other thing that Eugenio and I talked a lot about when we read the article was like, how does this guy get up every day and do this? How does he do that? And that, I think, was your big exploration as an actor. Like, how do you do that when you know that you're going to roll that rock up a hill and it's going to come right back down again? What gets you going in the morning?
Well, Sergio was telling me, let me tell you the story really quick. He was telling me that he wasn't sure of what he was doing. He was doubting all the time. He thought he was probably derailing, and then he was like, what am I doing with the kids? Probably they're gonna lose the year. I'm gonna ruin their lives. I'm gonna get fired. But it was more his hunger for change. He wanted to move from there. He doesn't want to be in the same spot. He wanted to make a change. And so it was more that than the fear of failing. So he kept going, and he finally achieved this amazing goal, but he was always doubting.
I think one of the most subversive things, in my opinion, that what subverts this movie that Chris was so insistent on was that feeling of just never knowing what the hell he's doing and going into it without just blindly. And Chris was constantly pushing that feeling, in working with Eugenio
And then just being plainly honest about it with the students, to show his vulnerability, to be, instead of the authority who had all the answers and sort of looked down at them and told them do this, I don't know, what do you think? And I felt like that was a great way to in a way disarm the students. I think it's also really helpful to disarm the audience to him. But I think, and this thing, I remember Ben and I were certain we were going to end the movie before we weren't going to have the scene where the TV trucks pull up and celebrate the results of the test. And then what did I do with the first draft? I put that in. And it's like, what are you doing? Yeah, okay, you're right, yeah. But the point of the movie really, I think, is how did he do this? That was the dramatic question that, I think excited us as filmmakers and storytellers to try and figure out. And it turns out it is this kind of relationship where you do treat children like they're really interesting beings that have really interesting things to say, and they can really do kind of anything. And this is just a little vignette, but we were lucky enough to have Sergio come to the set, and he was there quite a bit, like almost as an advisor. And I was just so struck with his phone was just blowing up the whole time, and I finally said, what's going on there? And he's like, oh, these are my students. There's students from the last 10, 15 years of his life who are in constant touch with him. And it's just like, yeah, we got that right.
And Eugenio, what was it like for you to have Sergio on set that often?
Oh my God, it was really scary. I mean, for any actor, when you're portraying someone who existed, it's always a challenge. But when you have to play someone who's still alive and that he's going to watch the movie, and then when I remember I was shooting one day, probably third, fourth day, and somebody from production told me, Sergio's here. And I was like, what, the real Sergio? I was like, yeah. And I was, where is he? He's in the monitor watching. Oh my God. It was really scary and intimidating. But on the other hand, I was able to, previously of course, to talk to him and ask him a lot of questions about his relationship with the kids. We wanted to be as accurate as possible. So everything that you see in the movie, it's real. It was kind of, let's say, supervised by him and Paloma, so we wanted to be really truthful to the story.
And it's so beautifully done, and your performance is just outstanding. I mean, as soon as you go in with the kids and you're there and you're telling them all to get on the boats, it's just like this ray of light.
That's funny, because that's exactly how I would describe him as a person.
Yes.
Well, that's
Yes, always.
Thank you very much. No, I was really scared because, you know, I'm usually a comedian. I'm always making people laugh, and I was so scared about this role because this is my first dramatic role starring in a movie. So I was panicked. You know that. I was during the rehearsals. I didn't know what. I was like 2 days before shooting. I was like having cold feet. I was like, I think I'm doing the wrong thing. I should just be producing. But I mean, at the end, I just trusted Chris, and he was writing so many things. But I remember I was panicked.
One of my favorite things of working with Eugenio is that he likes to work from the hair down, you know?
Yeah.
So he'll start with like a crazy hairdo and work his way down. So when we started, he was like trying to build this character with all these, you know, because he likes to hide underneath these things and transform himself into something else. And Chris kept sending him back up to wardrobe. So finally he came down, his hair was a little messy. He's wearing just basically what he's wearing in the movie. And he looks over at me and goes, "Hermano, I feel so naked." I went, "Great." Because this is, having been friends with Eugenio for 20 years, my dream, because I've always, the day I met him, I said, "You can do anything. You can do drama, you can do anything." And it took us a while. We wanted to be careful sort of when he would come out and do a drama, obviously, because audience, you want to make sure they're going to show up for it. But I was just excited to see him stripped down, to show the world what I always saw he could do, and I think he delivered.
And it's really hard to have that conversation when you're having it with your boss and telling him to get naked. You know, I think it's a testament to Eugenio's courage, and you know, Eugenio said something I'm going to share, so I hope you don't mind.
Yeah.
But he said to me, you know, it was the hair. It was absolutely the hair was the thing that broke the dam. But he was like, people know me, they're used to me, they see me, and this is true in Mexico. He's been in their living rooms for their entire lives, their parents' lives. I mean, if you don't know who he is in Mexico, he's the biggest thing ever, literally. You cannot describe it. And you know, everybody knows me, I've got to do something different so that, you know, and I sort of felt like, no, they don't. You're actually hiding. And I don't want you to hide, and I don't, and the way you have to sort of get in there with somebody like Eugenio, he's such a perfectionist, he's so driven to get it right, was, you know, but remember Sergio, how he didn't know what he was doing? He was doing something for the first time also, and he was probably terrified, and like he had a nervous breakdown. What if this go right? Like, he's on a high rope, what if he falls off? Like, that's exactly how we're gonna make you feel. And we're gonna film it. But the truth is, I think we're just seeing the result of actually getting Eugenio, and I think we're like scratching the surface of something, and it's gonna keep going. I'm just gonna sit back and be a huge fan and watch it.
Thank you. I think it's a moment to talk about the performances of the kids in this film. They're just so incredible and so natural, and I read that it was their first film.
Yeah.
What was your approach to that?
Well, I had first of all, it was exhaustive, tireless casting to just find sort of the right elements. I think the one where everyone was the most nervous was Nico, who we couldn't find Nico at all in Mexico City. We looked at, I don't know, on many hundreds of kids, and finally we decided to go send scouts up to the border. We thought maybe we needed this like slight edge, and so we sent people to Tamaulipas, the state that the story takes place in. And actually, one of the scouts, or one of the people that was, taping the announcement for the auditions, open auditions on telephone poles, went home to his son and said, "Hey, maybe you ought to try out for this." And that's Nico. And he had this, and I think, but everybody was a little nervous about him because as he told us on the first day, he's like, "I'm very pretty." And we wanted this kind of edge, and that was one way to go. And he did have a little kind of chutzpah, a little anger, but he also had this incredible insecurity and vulnerability that I thought just did something special for him and that character. And it would be a slightly different way to tell the story of that kid who's kind of on the edge and why he's on the edge. And so I fought for him pretty hard. I didn't have to fight hard with these guys over anything. It was, the whole process was director's dream. It was just like, you sure that's what you want? Okay, that's what we're doing. But I had this other secret weapon, which was this man, who, I had an idea, like that first scene where they meet him, only 3 kids were allowed to know who was in the movie with them. Because if the other kids knew, we would have ground to a complete halt, because the production would have been mobbed. And so we told the 3 kids, and we shot the first scene, literally on the first scene where they come meet him. It was when they found out they were working with Eugenio, and I shot their side first, just to see if I could get anything. I think they were so freaked out we didn't get anything. But Eugenio, I'll let you talk about it, but he just has this incredible way with kids, and he's worked with kids before, and I'll let you talk about it, but it was just an indispensable part of what we got.
Well, I was not a kid person back in 2007.
He has 4 children, by the way.
Well, that's another thing. But it was 2007. I was about to start shooting a movie called Under the Same Moon. Beautiful movie, yeah, and after that I was preparing for Instruction Not Included, and I had to work with kids, and I was not a kid person, honestly. And I told Patricia Reagan, the director, I was like, how does it work? Because how am I gonna work with this kid? And she was like, well, you need to bond with him. And we're like, while we're shooting, she was like, no, off screen, taking for an ice cream or something. And we're like, me? I don't know, what are we gonna talk about? I don't know how to do this. Anyway, she was like, you have to be with him 24/7, and it's true. That's the secret. That's what I did in Radical. It's a 24/7 job. You have to be friends with the kids all the time. So I remember since I arrived at 6 a.m. to the makeup trailer, I had to be making jokes and telling stories and playing with them. Sometimes I wanted to keep memorizing my lines, and they were like, Eugenio, blah, blah, blah. It's like having 30 kids at the same time. I was trying to concentrate, and they were like, hey, look at this painting, blah, blah, blah. Running around, I have to be, hey, woo, woo. But that was the only way, and it worked. Honestly, it worked. I remember that probably 10 days later after we started, one of the kids was like, hey, can I ask you a question? And we're like, yes. How can I impress a girl? And that was the moment when I said, I'm really bonding with them, because they were like really trusting me. So, and it was worth it. Honestly, we became a family. I'm about to post in the next days the last day of shooting, where we couldn't keep shooting because they were crying so bad. It was actually, it was the scene, the last scene when the exam, when I gathered with them and I telling them that I cry. I was crying because that was our last day together. That was the final scene, and it was very.
Everybody was crying when the camera was on the other side. And you turn around and be like, no, hold it.
Yeah, that was real. And that's because we really became a family, and we couldn't stop crying that day. So we got really emotional.
And also, these kids were not actors. Some of them wanted to be, so that's why they entered casting calls, but they hadn't worked before. Many of them were just from the town, the little village we were in, and just like answered, they were making $100 a day or whatever to contribute to their family. And imagine like they literally they would go home every day and say, "Mom, Dad, I was just working with Eugenio Derbez." And they'd be like, "Yeah, right." It took about 3 weeks until like it was all the kids in the town were like, "Yeah," and then finally some parents started like, and then we did actually get mobbed and almost grind to a halt. But I think the other thing was just, and if the conversation comes back, I'll talk about it more, but was the way in which, and I kept being struck with it over and over, the way in which the movie was really the example, the proof almost, of the story that we were telling, which was that if you take these kids, I talk to them all absolutely like adults. I don't do kid talk. And they had Eugenio to look up to as this incredible figure, mentor, kind of shining example, and then had each other as kind of peer pressure to cheer each other on and almost try hard together. And on some level, the movie really was to me proof of the story that we were telling, that this genius is everywhere. It just needs to be seen and empowered. So that would be my other answer to that question.
Thank you. I believe that we are at time, but I just wanted to say a personal thank you, because as I mentioned before, I have family in Tamaulipas, and one of the things that my cousin told me is nobody cares about us. Nobody cares about what happens to us. So I have to thank you for making this.
Well, it's funny. I
caring.
just want to add on to that. We met with Sergio today. Actually, we met with a recreo. It's called like a convention of teachers in the state of Jalisco. It was online. There were 6,000 people in the room, and there were 20 to 70,000 watching it live streaming online. And we went on this morning, me, Eugenio, and the real Paloma. Sergio was at school teaching. He couldn't join. But we met him a week or so ago, and started this idea of how do we get something going in Mexico with the education system. We're here right now. Right now, all of us are here right now because of this dream, this idea that this guy had to start in his own neighborhood and like the audacity to change the world. And I'm like, dude, you're doing it. So how do we keep the dream going? If you could have whatever you want, what would your dream be? And I think he's gonna say, oh, I want to replicate the model, and my idea is like learning labs after school, this whole thing. And he says, it knocked the wind out of me. He says, I would just like teachers to be valued more. And this whole movie was like that. But I'd like to think that, okay, we'll do that, but let's start with this. Hopefully this triggers a conversation, whether it's here or it's in Mexico or everywhere else in the world, but I know we feel mandated.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this.